Welcome everyone to Up the Ladder, the latest edition of our podcast. And today we are going to be talking about a topic that is extremely timely because we're seeing it in ourselves and we're seeing it in a ton of our patients, which is digestive issues and gut health.
That's right. Anything from bloating to constipation to diarrhea to abnormal pain, hardness, like you said, inflammation. We've just got a lot of things going on, like you said, with ourselves and in the office. And digestive distress is probably one of the foundational causes of almost everything that might go upside down in every other system in our body, because we have I call your digestive system, it's almost as if you've got an entire galaxy and you have a mini planet. No, you have a whole nother planet inside your belly, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, I was really surprised. So we had started this by talking about Mental Health Week, which we've extended through the month in the office. And as part of the ways of addressing stress and overall mental health, you wrote up something, and so we're taking a deeper dive into it today about, how much more bacteria we have. I think we have more bacteria in our stomach than cells in our body.
That's exactly right.
Which was mind-blowing to me.
Yes.
I think today what we're going to start to dive into when we get there is like a 3-step process about how to begin addressing digestive and gut health.
And why it's so important. Yes, actually, you have about 4.5 pounds of bacteria in your body, and it all works as an ecosystem. As a matter of fact, you need all of that bacteria. We would not survive in a sterile environment. So everything is very carefully, intelligently designed as far as why do we have all that bacteria? What does it do for us? So I want to break it down also by saying, you have, I like to call it almost 3 types of bacteria. You have beneficial bacteria, you have what I like to call opportunistic bacteria, and then you have transitional bacteria. So that your beneficial, your microbiome is made up of trillions of beneficial bacteria, and that bacteria is responsible for doing so many things. One of which is digesting and eating bad bacteria. Actually, the cell wall of some good bacteria acts as a absorbent or a neutralizer to actually neutralize pathogens, fungus, things like candida, viruses, all of those things, underlying bacteria and things, accumulated toxins that we're breathing in. That's what transitional is, by the way. It's things that we eat, breathe, and drink in. So your opportunistic bacteria are bacteria that we all have in our body, right? You have, believe it or not, a little bit of a coli right now. We all do. But what happens is the delicate balance of the entire microbiome, and I'm sorry, but I can't help myself, but all I always think about is Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think of good bacteria as the guardians. And really there is a delicate balance that within the galaxy and in the structure of it, that things need to be kept in check, because once anything upsets that delicate balance, that's when we find ourselves, getting sick or having digestive distress and things like that. So when we say 90% of your immune system is actually in the gut, what we're trying to tell you is all that good bacteria is actually acting as a buffer, an absorbent, and a neutralizing force. It can even neutralize heavy metals, actually. So it's amazing what it can do.
Wow.
I want to go one more step too, if it's okay.
Go.
So your gut wall lining is made up of a lot of really great bacteria, but it's also almost got this like turf, if you would. Okay, so the turf, so entire length of the intestinal wall has this protective barrier, and it acts as a turf. It's the mucosa. So it acts as a turf to the gut wall lining. And just like any turf, after time and tread and really being rough on that turf, it can get holes in it. It can actually start to degrade a little bit. And that's also where we run into problems. So between the gut wall lining and then what feeds good bacteria, and we'll get into that, what destroys good bacteria and what causes that upside downness can be multi-layered. So we're going to talk about stress.
Well, and I think, at least to me, I think when to kind of take a sidestep to the gut wall lining.
Yes.
Most people think, well, my stomach is an organ, and so it's really thick. But that lining is extremely thin.
That's right.
And so it doesn't take a lot of inflammation or wear and tear to begin to get the leaky gut and longer term exposures, which cause autoimmune issues and
that's right.
that sort of thing. So I think that was surprising when I remember learning about that is yes, your stomach is an organ, but the lining between your bloodstream and what gets introduced as foreign invaders and the actual inside of your stomach is extremely, extremely thin.
It really, really is.
Yeah.
You have tight junctures as a matter of fact, that line the intestinal wall lining. And just like you said, just any, wear and tear, once those tight junctures start to loosen up, if you're struggling with food sensitivity or you are not digesting food properly.
Yeah, so I think we want to spend a lot of time on, some ways to. I think if we break this up, let's first talk about what are common things people are doing wrong, which is disrupting their gut biome.
Right.
What are ways that we can gauge or test that?
Sure.
And then, I think we talked about briefly like the 3-step process of weed, seed, feed.
Exactly.
And so let's kind of start with what are common things that people are doing that even if it doesn't necessarily immediately cause diarrhea or a stomach ache is still probably causing issues and that's going to affect their gut biome.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the NSAIDs. Okay. So ibuprofen, aspirin, less commonly known, the birth control pill can do that. Rounds of antibiotics can do that. So if you've had, even 1 round or 2 round, you have to understand that it doesn't just rip out all the bad bacteria. Antibiotics actually rip out and sterilize all the good bacteria, kind of leaving you at ground zero. With all of that, and food sensitivities is a huge one.
We're seeing that a lot right now.
And I don't mind telling you the top 2 too. So wheat contains something called zonulins in it, and zonulins are the #1 cause of leaky gut syndrome, or what we would call cause of permeability alongside of that. They can really wreak havoc on your intestinal wall lining. The other one is aflatoxins, and aflatoxins are actually found in peanuts, peanut butter. So what it is it's a significant amount of mold and yeast that they allow in the peanut butter that can actually. So as if we're talking about food sensitivities, I just wanted to bring up those 2.
So you're saying the 2 most common are peanut butter or things like peanut butter and wheat or gluten.
And more commonly known as gliadin too. But those would be the things that can really set us up. And then, like I said before, a really big one is stress.
Yeah.
Stress is a really big deal. And some people ask me, why is that? Why would stress affect my digestive system?
Yeah.
Because when cortisol is ramped up, or any stress hormone, and your adrenaline dumping, and you've got norepinephrine and epinephrine dumping into your bloodstream, your body has to send a signal to the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is going to do what it needs to do to put you in survival mode. So all it cares about is getting you out of immediate danger at that point in time. So what it does is it says, you know what, I'm just going to shut down the digestive system.
Yep.
So now we don't have gastric output.
So, stress is still a hormonal issue, but, a down cascade response of that is, bad digestive health, essentially.
Right. So, and can I touch on that real quick too? And I'll stay on task as much as I can.
I love it. Go for it.
So, when we talk about stress, it is worth noting that your gut is the only organ actually that has a two-way communication process with the brain. So the brain and the gut can actually talk to each other where really no other organ can. It's really your brain connecting to every other organ.
They call the gut the second brain.
They call the
That's been the last 5 years they've been.
Yep.
They've been calling
second brain. And I'm going to actually use another term. Because the microbiome has such a huge effect on being able to talk to the brain, sometimes some of the anxiety and the depression and the stress and just anything that we're dealing with on an emotional level can actually come from communication of a dysbiosis, is a dysbiotic environment, which means that there are a lot more bad guys in there than good guys. And they're actually sending signals to the brain that upregulates that anxiety. That's called gut and psychology syndrome. So I thought that was worth noting too, because it's pretty fascinating that, no, it's not just all here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because I think we see that. I have that conversation a lot with, is it a joint issue or a muscle issue? It's usually both, right? The joint causes muscle imbalance causes joint issues.
Right.
The same sort of thing between stress and anxiety causing digestive issues, and digestive issues, negative feedback loop up to the brain causing stress and anxiety.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yes. All right.
So, so we talked about
what?
Wheat and peanuts. And the other ones are what? Dairy, soy, corn, gluten, and is it the peanut butter? I know there's like the top 5.
Yeah,
right?
there's the top 5.
Okay.
Peanuts specifically.
Those food sensitivities are the top 5, but normally we'll talk about this when we get to talk about testing and stuff like that.
Talk about testing.
We talked about stress, we talked about food sensitivities, we talked about anything else that is a common. I think, over the last 6 months, we've seen a ton of emotional eating. Let's also talk about the other emotional side of how so people have used food to mask emotional issues and alcohol. So let's talk about alcohol and gut health.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So
sorry everyone. I'm with you. Yeah. I enjoy my glass of wine and some bourbon, but it's crazy, right? I mean, you see these Zoom videos where it's like lunchtime and the mom's walking around with a glass of wine, like,
right?
Because I get it. Like, parents are extremely stressed right now.
Yes.
Trying to manage the kids being at home and schooling and jobs, and like life is flipped upside down. So I am empathetic to the emotional and the, what has been happening.
Right.
But we're seeing it dramatically show up. Right. And if you talk to other primary healthcare providers, they're seeing it dramatically show up.
Yes.
Between the levels of prescriptions being issued for stress and anxiety, and what we're seeing, the other physical effects of digestive issues and tons of other things. Yes. So let's talk about
So
alcohol.
So alcohol is almost like rubbing salt into a wound and just continuing to do that over and over again. That's how your intestines actually feel about it, right? And believe it or not, because it's so quickly absorbed, right? You're getting the brunt of all of that, rubbing the salt into the wound type of mechanisms happening.
Plus, depending on what you drink, a lot of people do have sensitivities to barley.
Yes.
To rye.
Yes.
To, some of those,
hops.
Which will be...
I see hops coming up over and over again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it
and
is...
the tannins in wine.
The tannins in the wine, that's right. And honestly, it's interesting because you also said, let's talk about the alcohol and then let's talk about... So most alcohol is also fermented too, which and they have wild ferment strains, right? So the thing about having a wild ferment strain is that if you've already kind of got a lot of wonky, bad bacteria sitting in your system, what this alcohol is actually doing is coming alongside of that and feeding actually all of that bad bacteria. So not only is it rubbing salt into a wound, but we're feeding excess bacteria because alcohol is going to turn to sugar,
Right.
So that's going to feed.
And you've got extra stress on the liver.
Right.
And another factor.
And let's talk about like fermentation. So
because fermentation with good bacteria, fermented foods is
good,
beneficial. You want to include more fermented foods.
And actually you can tolerate it if the balance, like I said, the delicate balance of the whole microbiome has good bacteria. See, if you are flourished with good bacteria, usually, all the toxins that are coming in, or those things are already taken care of. Mm-hmm. They're already being buffered. But if you couple alcohol with emotional food, a desire for, emotional eating. And what happens is that when we emotionally eat, I don't know if you eat a lot all at one time, right? So you eat a lot at one time. What starts to happen is it overwhelms your whole entire body's digestive system. And more times than not, what happens is your body, doesn't have the ability to, break down, 2 pounds of food. It likes to have, some here and some there to work on as you go. And what happens is some of that food will sit in your system. You want to talk about fermenting. If it's a carbohydrate, it's going to ferment.
It's not getting digested.
And if it's a protein, it's going to putrefy. Proteins and fats putrefy. So, regularity is a huge important part of this too. And again, a healthy microbiome is going to help you stay regular. But that's my thoughts on.
Interesting. Okay. So, what are, I guess, ways that people... because a lot of conversations that we've had, it's people don't necessarily consider themselves constipated, even though they really are.
Okay.
Or they don't have necessarily like IBS, so they don't really think like I have a digestive issue.
Right.
Which if you took an actual poll, a majority of people probably do have some digestive issues going on. Yes. So what are ways that people can kind of self-assess? Mm-hmm. We know, so we offer a food sensitivity test.
Right.
We've done a lot of those over the last 6 or 8 weeks.
Right.
Everyone has been shocked at the results because things that they had no idea were positive or coming back positive. And when they're starting to remove those foods, like they immediately are feeling better.
Yes.
Because a lot of times it's foods that they're eating a lot of.
That's right.
Consistently. Mm-hmm. But besides a food sensitivity test, which I think is probably one of the best ways to know, you can also do a food elimination diet.
You can.
But symptom-wise,
sure.
What do people
What
look
are you
for?
looking for?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're definitely looking for distended belly, or bloating, okay? If you become really bloated after a meal or you experience a lot of gas after a meal, that's actually not something that, you want a lot of. Actually, that means there's something going on. Like if you've got a lot of gas, if you've got, a lot of inflammation. I smiled a little bit because, I'm going to tell a story about, so my family was very Italian. They are very Italian.
Yeah, you are Italian. Yeah.
I'm Italian. We're Italian. And so most of my family, they walked around saying, that it was, it was the patelli pasta belly. Like everybody inherited the pasta belly, right? Yeah. Patelli pasta belly. And so I really fell in love, with nutrition and realized, oh, hold on a second. Like, you're really not supposed to have a pasta belly, so, and you don't have to live with a pasta belly,
Right.
But it just kind of reminds me of that. If you notice an extreme amount, some people actually like to use a tape measure and measure where they're at, before they eat a meal and where they are after they eat a meal. If you're
looking at how long would you wait after a meal?
Oh, it's 20 minutes at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Between the time you eat it and 20 minutes for sure.
I feel like women are a lot more in tune with this than men are. Mm-hmm. Even though men, I'm positive, have just as much bloating as women.
Right.
Women come in and say, oh, I feel so bloated.
Yes.
You never hear a male say that, which is kind of strange. But for sure, men are going to have the same symptoms.
Absolutely.
It's just we're not
right
body aware enough in most cases to recognize it.
Yes. Another huge indicator is if you happen to be a stomach sleeper.
So walk me through this, because that's interesting. Never heard this.
So if you are a stomach sleeper, what you're doing is you're trying to protect something. And usually people who find themselves sleeping on their stomach, it's because they have something here that, subconsciously their body knows that they're trying to protect. It's usually always digestive issues, always digestive issues.
I've never heard that. That's interesting.
So that's another huge indicator. And
let's talk about regularity.
Regularity is a huge indicator.
So most people are like, I'm regular, once a week or every 3 days or something, having a bowel movement.
Yes.
Let's kind of clear the air about what is truly regular.
Okay.
And what is you think you're regular, you're not regular.
That's right. So true medical clinical, that clinical constipation is actually every fourth day.
Okay.
They mark it as clinical constipation.
Okay.
Here at Westerville Chiropractic and Nutrition, where we take a holistic approach, the truth is that you should be having a bowel movement every day. And not to get graphic, but you should have a bowel movement or two every day, as long as they both or one of them is at least 12 inches in length, that it's easy to pass, that it's smooth, that you're not seeing food particles, that you're not seeing mucus, that you're not seeing blood. I'm sorry to get so graphic, but those things really matter, and that it has a form. It has an actual form. It should look C-like or S-like.
Okay.
Yes.
So what about the person who falls somewhere in the middle of that?
Okay.
Right? They're not going 4 or 5 days without a bowel movement.
Right.
But they're certainly not going every day without a bowel movement.
Exactly. So that's when, honestly, I feel like people just come in for a digestive assessment and let me feel what's going on, because there can be so many things digestively, which I think should be a whole another talk that we do, definitely, because there's a lot of digestive pieces to making sure that, you're going to the bathroom every day. I land in that middle, so I actually relate to that. It's a miracle if I go every day, but I'm working on it, and working towards it and making sure that, my body can support that, because you don't want things sitting in your stomach that's going to feed, bad bacteria.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then obviously when people come in, you're doing a digestive assessment where you're actually feeling how does the abdomen feel?
Yes.
And so what do you look for when you're doing that assessment?
So we do work on a scale between pressure and pain. just to kind of see where someone might lie within that. So so we palpate the ascending intestines, the transverse, and then the descending intestine. We feel out the stomach. We feel out where the stomach is, laying, where the diaphragm is, making sure, usually someone who comes in, if they are feeling pain through that palpation, you can get an idea of what's going on in there. We also check the ileocecal valve, making sure that the, contents of the small intestines are actually dumping into those large intestines and doing what they need to do. But it's very telling. We can also tell how much hydrochloric acid production somebody is actually producing, because that actually is another component. Digestion is another component that can either neutralize bad bacteria or sterilize and leave you vulnerable.
That's a whole nother talk too, right?
Yeah, it is.
Acid reflux.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. So in general, though, people, you want to take a look at your gut health. If you're feeling bloating after meals, definitely.
Yes, right.
If you're not having regular bowel movements, at least conservatively every day to every other day.
That's right.
If it's going longer than every 2 days, and I would recommend people to do a journal over like a week or two.
Yes.
Because you think you're going more often than you are. I guarantee it.
Yes.
Because when we start asking people questions, they just take a journal, like write it down.
Right.
Type it in your phone, because you're using it on your phone anyways when you're on a bowel movement usually.
I don't do that.
Anyways, so start to take inventory.
Angelo does.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
So take inventory of where you're at, symptom-wise, and
absolutely.
Right. Oftentimes it's like people know, like, I've got extremely loose stools all the time. Like it's the extremes that people know, but there's a really large gray middle area that people could be feeling tremendously better than what they are, and they don't realize that they've got some issues.
Right. Yeah. They've been kind of accommodating that, low grade inflammation for some time. So.
Yeah. I get it. Because it's, when you're talking about cutting out foods, like that's so scary for people, right? When we, like, that's the number one reason people do not get a food sensitivity test.
It
is they're afraid of what the answers are going to be.
They are so afraid of the answers.
They do not want to have to cut out things that they love.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. So I get it. I'm there with you. So now, moving forward, let's pretend, we know someone has a digestive issue. Either they've done a food sensitivity test, or, we're just addressing, like, somebody knows I just need to do kind of a reset on my digestive health. Walk us through the weed, seed, feed process.
Okay. So weed, seed, and feed is, I almost think of it like a garden, but it's your gut. First, what we have to do is we have to weed out all of those nasty things that are going to prohibit your garden from being able to grow. Okay. So that's going to be, those are the food antigens.
Prepping the soil.
We're prepping the soil. We're removing food antigens. We are making sure there's no fungus or mold in that soil. We're making sure there's no underlying virus, parasite, or any what we call stealth pathogenic material that's in there that needs to be eradicated before we can actually have that healthy soil. So we just want to make sure that we've removed anything that can compromise the actual soil.
Okay. So if I say, okay, I want to reset my gut health.
Yes.
And I need to take a look at restricting carbohydrates.
Yes.
Restricting sugar.
Yes.
And dairy, probably.
Yes. Anything that ends with an OCE, actually, too. So just remember that all of these organisms thrive off of sugar and anything that turns to sugar.
So what do you mean by OCE?
Like, so dextrose, sucralose, anything that ends in an OSE is also going to be picked up by those bacteria as sugar.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long would I need to do that to properly prep the soil?
So properly prepping the soil. So are we feed and seed the whole protocol as far as I like to look at it over 4 to 6 weeks. So I like to do actually 3 rounds of like a 6-week type of
so it's not as long as people think.
No,
we're talking 6 weeks
it's really
to get your digestive health from poor to bad to good. Great.
Exactly.
That's encouraging.
It is.
Most people think it's like, I mean, you hear stories where it's like, I've been trying to balance my bacteria for years.
Right.
It's like, well, there has to be some other significant underlying issues if it takes years to balance that.
There are more,
and there are cases where that's like that.
So Candida happens to be one of those stubborn types of yeast where it does take some time, and it does take usually rounds and rounds. That's something I would say sometimes we're looking between 3 and 6 months to rehabilitate that kind of a thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to get started, eliminate the top 5.
Eliminate the top 5. So, that's right.
2 to 4 weeks.
That's right. Just, through the duration, eliminate, I say 6.
6 weeks, okay.
6 weeks while you're like trying to clear all this out. Yep.
Okay, so it's not just the weeding phase that you're eliminating those. It's through the 6 weeks
you want to support,
weed, feed, and seed.
It's through the 6
So you're doing them all.
You're exactly
all together.
That's
so it's not like a 2 weeks of this, a 2 weeks of this, and a 2 weeks of this.
Right. No, it is actually.
Okay.
You're correct about that. It's 2, 2, and 2. So it would be 2 weeks.
But the weed, it lasts 6 weeks, and then we start.
Right. Seeding.
Is it 2 weeks in?
So 2 weeks in, and then what we do,
we start seeding.
We start seeding. So seeding is where we are actually going to, create a new community or a colony. We're going to start creating some colonies, and we're going to let those organisms thrive and then procreate. Is what we want those guys to do. So it's, I mean, it's amazing. Like I said, you have a whole nother universe living inside of you. So as those procreate, those are going to build up colony by colony, and then, they're going to help you start to flourish as far as all of that good bacteria is concerned, just laying out, now we're building colonies. So we're going to feed them. We're going to make sure that they have exactly what they need to thrive in that area. Okay.
So we've got, if it's a step, right? Yep. First step is weed, we're eliminating. Second step is seed. How do people go about putting those good bacteria?
Right. So we're going to...
What does that look like?
It looks like taking a probiotic, right? It looks like sometimes taking something that's going to help the probiotic, because probiotics are transient, which means that we were all born with our own unique set of our good bacteria, of a microbiome that was passed down to us, from our mothers and through generation to generation. Okay. We're not all the same. So because of that, when you take a probiotic, there might be some strains of that probiotic that your body actually does not identify with, and it will waste it. So what we need to do is build the foundation on which we're actually nurturing anything that's left of your body's own natural unique microbiome, and building that up, and then adding the probiotic, and that can detect anything that it recognizes and help build upon that too. Okay. So it's a twofold.
So I've got a couple questions on probiotics.
Sure. Yes.
Prebiotic, probiotic.
Good job. Okay, yeah. How does it work out? So the prebiotics actually feed the probiotics. So you've heard a lot of, prebiotic and things like that. So prebiotics actually are going to feed it. Now, not everybody should be on a prebiotic.
So is this the step where you're talking about feeding your own body's healthy bacteria? Feeding your own body's healthy bacteria. And believe it or not, you can do that. You can do that with food too. We kind of get into, and again, because we're not a one size fits all, some people actually cannot tolerate prebiotics if they're already in digestive distress, especially inulin. So it can really upset if you have SIBO, which is small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. Inulin is going to send you off the hook. So,
for most of us, we can feed with food, just healthy food.
Okay.
You know, just, yeah.
So in most cases, people probably don't need a prebiotic. They need more of a probiotic.
They do.
Okay. Now, probiotics, you see some that are encapsulated, you see some that are powder, and you see some that you have to keep refrigerated.
Yes.
Walk us through what a good probiotic looks like.
Okay.
And
Good. A good probiotic has to be refrigerated. I mean, that's going to be my top. There are some shelf-stable ones that I really love. And for those of us who travel and that are on the run, it's just vital that you're going to need a shelf-stable one. But for your main component, you want those guys to be refrigerated because they're going to have the most alive, active cultures out of, you know, the ones that are going to be shelf stable. And then, you know, so enterically coated versus powder, I'll talk about that too. So I love both. So the truth is that powder actually works well for making sure that we're getting into the small intestine, and we're getting into some parts of that large intestine. Encapsulated is better if we need to go ahead and feed any of the colon.
Okay.
So you want it enteric.
So in some cases it may be like a hybrid or blend. Sometimes you need powder.
Yep.
Sometimes
and
you
I
need...
do that often.
Interesting.
We'll
pulse it. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So who do you like? Let's talk.
What probiotics?
What probiotics do you like?
Okay, I prefer, and I love Metagenics.
Okay.
So I love Metagenics. After that, if you want to get shelf stable, I would stick with Orthomolecular.
Yep.
Orthomolecular has an awesome shelf stable probiotic, and then ProSynbiotic by Standard Process. So those are some really good ones there.
Okay. And we also have Orthomolecular also carries a Pro 225. Which is for people who are having like, we really feel you have a leaky gut.
Yes.
It is, so I think normally they have 25 billion. And then the 225 has 225 million.
Yes.
So it's like really bombarding the system. Of course, that's not necessarily great in all cases because like you said, sometimes it's, too much.
Yes.
If it's not a good fit for
right.
what would normally be the strains of bacteria you have in
that's
that
right.
are good for you.
That's right.
Now, the other thing that I believe that you use a lot in this kind of seed phase and calming things down.
Yes.
Number one of my favorites is okra.
Yes.
So okra pepsin.
Okra pepsin.
That if anyone is having ulcers.
Yes.
Or, needs to like significantly heal. I've seen crazy ulcer cases heal up.
That's
like
right.
in 2 weeks with okra pepsin.
And sometimes actually conjoining that with marshmallow root, which is a liquid, can really soothe a very angry ulcer. So
interesting. And then we've been using a lot of SBI Protect right now. So walk us through SBI Protect. When do you use it? What's in it?
Okay.
Like what's great about that?
So when the mucosa, that turf that I have talked about, when it becomes degraded, that is what SBI Protect does, is it comes back in and it builds a new turf, is what it does. So SBI Protect is very important for those people who are experiencing leaky gut syndrome or anything that might be causing some spilling over, like you said, into the bloodstream. That's what I call our heal and seal supplements. So it's very effective.
Awesome. And so when someone you feel has leaky gut or again significantly irritated or agitated stomach, that's when you're going to use something like that. I do.
So what it also does, it has this this beautiful ability to actually act as if some of those good bacteria I was describing, remember how I said the cell wall collects different bacteria? Okay. The SBI Protect will fill in the void and do that same thing also, as well as rebuild the gut wall lining.
Interesting.
So
then we've seeded. How do we feed that?
How do we feed it?
And you know, continue to make sure that the good bacteria, it continues to thrive.
That's right.
What does that look like?
Okay, so that looks like you doing a major part of what you're doing definitely with your food. You know, making sure that you're feeding your body the right food.
So first of all, not consuming the bad stuff is number one.
Exactly.
Stop the insults.
Stop the insults.
Number two, you know, feeding it. At that point, that's where fermented foods is beneficial.
Yes.
And would more raw foods be beneficial or gently cooked? Like what's gonna really...
Sure, yes. Gently steamed food. So where this actually ties back to, you know, your, the way that your bowel movements actually move. So what feeding is too is just making sure that whatever I am eating is actually being fully digested, right? Okay. Fully broken down, just like you said. So what would I eat? So, you know, and it's a little bit different for everyone because yes, in some cases it is, you know, softer steamed vegetables. For some people, it's going to be, actually, it's true that raw foods are harder to digest than the steamed foods are. Some of those plant proteins are harder to break down on the body. So definitely making sure that we're just, you know, eating in a way that the bacteria that we have now reestablished understand and were born to actually digest our food. So remember, they're digesting our food. So I always work on a taxonomy. So so the easier to digest the food, the more flourishing you're going to have in that feed phase. Okay. So what that means is that if you look at food in terms of molecular structure, think about the size of a bison or a cow. Right. Right? And the molecular structure... I was
going to ask about meats and proteins.
Mm-hmm. And then think of a fish.
Yep.
Right? So you would want to stay on the smaller end of the molecular structure while you're doing that. And then, of course, you know, just take into consideration the size, you know, of your plants.
Portions.
Yes, and your portions. Exactly. Again, overwhelming the body with a lot of food at once is going to be no good for that microbiome. It's going to have to work extra hard, and it might just be sitting there for way too long. So be very conscious about portion sizes, which means 6 to 7 ounces of, you know, fish, 6 to 7 ounces of vegetable, and then, you know, 5 ounces of fruit.
Yeah. Well, we can also talk about juicing more.
Yes.
We can talk about bone broth.
Yes.
Huge, right? The collagen.
Yes.
And you know, the other amino acids that you're getting in bone broth is a phenomenal feeding.
It is. Even glucosamine you're getting in there. So it's really good stuff.
Gotcha. So that's where you're talking about, you know, don't go back to your, you know, pizza and you know, huge, but we're talking like salads, fishes, chickens, things that are easy to digest. You can still do beef. Make sure it's quality. Some people may want to include like an enzyme, which will help your body break that down more timely.
I always, well, hydrochloric acid is something I always say that, you know, we check that pump. And if you're having a hard time with that pump, your body's not digesting the protein. So always adding a little bit of hydrochloric Zypan is a really good move. Or like you said, a Digest Forte, some enzymes or something.
So when would someone know, kind of related but not related?
It is.
So looking at should someone take like an HCl versus an enzyme?
Okay, so enzymes, pretty much if you are carb and fat, if that meal is carb fat dominant, you want your enzymes. And if a meal is protein dominant, you want to take the hydrochloric acid.
Interesting. I've always thought it was not the opposite, but I thought with like a heavy steak or something more protein based that enzymes would be better. So that's really, I learned something new.
Yeah.
Awesome. So essentially we're going to cut out the bad stuff.
Yes.
We're going to try to populate with probiotics in healing the gut lining with some quality products. You get what you pay for with probiotics.
Yes, you do. You do.
Fish oil, probiotics, like there's a couple of products, like types of supplements that you absolutely get what you pay for. And I believe probiotics is one of those.
They are, and you can feel the difference between them.
Yeah.
You know when something is working and when it's not.
And then you're going to feed well with lightly cooked, smaller portions, like healthy, in general, healthy foods.
Yes, just getting back to the basics.
Great. Let's talk, if we're talking digestive health, fiber.
Okay.
Because we're talking about regularity, we're talking about, we have so many people that are like, as soon as I have a salad, it goes right through me. Exactly. Right? And that's a fiber, that's a whole other set of issues, but many people are fiber deficient.
They are.
They're semi-constipated. They're going, every 2 to 3 days instead of every 1 to 2 days.
Yes.
So walk me through fiber.
Okay, so fiber is one of those things where, remember how we were talking about how all those good guys actually sometimes feed off of, whatever it is that we're putting in our body. They can digest those things, right? So number one is this. If you do have a leaky gut, you're not going to tolerate fiber. You don't have the ability. There is.
So the people who say I can't eat kale or green veggies, which is high in fiber.
That's right.
And it goes right through them. Those are the people who have pretty much have leaky gut.
Yes.
And that's why they're not tolerating the fiber.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
And then if you want to break it down even further, so say we do have exactly what we need, and like I said, that whole ecosystem is working together for us, right? And so it's thriving on, and it's digesting that fiber and using the remnants to try to, push things along for us, which is wonderful. You have two sources of fiber. One is soluble fiber and one is insoluble fiber. And I will say this, that there is a difference between if you are combating constipation or you are combating diarrhea. They actually will be one will be more effective than the other where that is concerned.
Okay.
So, yes.
We carry whole food fiber.
Yes.
There's where else can people get fiber from besides just, a supplement form?
So from your diet.
Yep.
So
what foods should people, if they...
Right. So interesting enough, some people can get those sources from things like quinoa, right? And again, if you're doing well as far as tolerating, your insoluble fiber, you can do the green leafies. And as a matter of fact, walnuts and almonds are actually on there, but you want to be careful with that, by the way. And I'm going to say this,
if you have
digestive issues, you have to be very careful with that. But once you get, your body all back and, up to par, you can definitely do that. Brown rice is also a really good one, for being able to help yourself move through,
Okay. Great. And I would say this just popped into my head, but I feel like, because I was thinking of different types of fibers that we could talk about, but something to be aware of also is so many people, when they start to cut out gluten, you want to be extremely cautious about the gluten-free products that you're using.
Yes.
Because they're garbage.
They are garbage.
They're corn, soy,
potato, white rice.
It's filler food.
Yes.
It's not actually it may not have gluten in it, but it's definitely not any more beneficial than if they would honestly be having something with gluten.
Exactly.
So I would say, as we look at what to cut out and then what you're adding in, be very, very cautious. You want to use more whole foods.
Right.
Not just, let me go to the gluten-free aisle and load up with pastas that are gluten-free, because even, the pretzels and the chips and the...
Right.
all of that stuff is still not going to help your digestive system.
That's right.
It's going to be still very hard to digest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Anything else? I feel like we've covered a ton of things here. I would say if you want to begin to improve your digestive health on your own, this is absolutely something you can do by yourself.
Yes.
There's phenomenal products you can find to seed. Really, it's a matter of having the accountability and the motivation to begin to cut out what you should not be consuming and put more of what you should be consuming in. That's going to solve a majority of the issues.
Yes.
But certainly, if you're at a point where I need some more details, I need some more specifics on what to cut out, what to include, there's a whole array of ways that people can interact and engage with you on being able to know all of those things. And I know firsthand, I know from experiences in the office, it's a dramatic difference when your digestive system is not doing well compared to when it is.
Right.
I mean, it significantly affects your life.
Your whole life, because all you're looking through is the visor of the inflammation and the pain that you're feeling, or accommodating. It just changes everything.
And so often it's debilitating to feel like, man, I know I should eat, but I'm afraid to eat because it makes me feel horrible.
Oh my gosh, it's the worst feeling in the world. And then it's the most wonderful feeling when you find those things that actually start working, and then you start feeling good, about it. So
and still tastes good, right? So big plug for
Clean Juice. Yes, in Westerville.
We had lunch there recently, and smoothie bowl, pumpkin smoothie, all clean products,
all organic. Yes,
tasted amazing,
so good,
and easy on your digestive system.
Very easy.
And we didn't even talk about FODMAPs and all of those things, but
that's exciting.
That's a whole nother level. We'll save that for another episode. But definitely, if you have questions, reach out. We're happy to help you get started. If you know you want some additional accountability or more of a true diagnosis on if you have leaky gut or if you have certain intolerances, Angela is for sure your go-to for that. So we'll see everyone soon, and tune in next time. Thanks.